Welcome to another episode of Adventures in Real Estate. We've got Chris Dueillet here today. Chris is a broker with CBRE, actually has one of our properties currently listed, and we go through the entire process, a lot of in-depth knowledge and a little behind-the-scenes information to help you get into your first deal or to buy a deal or know how a buyer and seller and broker all work together and how to go ahead and get your deal under contract and so that you can be successful in real estate as well. All right, thank you. Let's get to it. We have got with us Chris Dueillet. He is a broker with CBRE and been a broker for about 21, 22 years?
Yes, long time.
A long time. And where did you start out at?
So I originally started out at Marcus & Millichap, and then I've been with CBRE for about 16 years.
16 years. They must like you over there.
I guess so. They haven't gotten rid of me yet.
Good. Well, and how much in business do you do? Do you have any idea? Do you have an annual number or total number?
So our team last year did 1.8 billion, 41 transactions. I myself, over my career, have been like a little over 1.5 billion. So
Okay.
kind of more of that B&C product, workforce housing kind of product the whole time.
Always apartments the whole time?
Always apartments, yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna go back to what I think was our first deal. Actually, let's go back farther.
Okay.
Because didn't your dad do deals with my dad?
Yes, yes. So my dad started in this business doing multifamily in Dallas in 1972.
Wow.
And so, so when I mentioned, Dad, I'm doing a deal with Darwin German, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago, he's like, wait a minute, I think I know his dad from the 80s.
Yeah.
So, the German and the DA names go back pretty far.
Yeah, that is awesome.
Yeah.
That is absolutely awesome.
Yeah.
And the first deal that we actually did, was the first deal Shadowwood?
I think so. Yeah, over in Fort Worth. Yeah.
I love that story. Here it was. Do you remember 2009?
It was during the recession.
9 or 10?
Yeah, I think 9.
2009. I get a call from Chris, and he said, I've got a deal, and it's fallen out 3 times, and the seller's getting pissed at me.
Yeah.
I need an offer from a real buyer that somebody's actually going to close. And I went and looked at this property. You remember Shadowwood?
It was pretty banged up. Flat roof, right off Calmont and I-30.
Yeah, rough area of town.
Yeah.
I went to the courtyard, nice courtyard style, built in the early 60s.
Mm-hmm.
And I stood in the middle of the courtyard and I looked up at the units upstairs through the windows and through the roofs.
Yes.
So you could see right on through. So
Clear blue sky.
Clear blue. It needed everything. It was a foreclosure.
It was, yeah, bank owned. Yeah.
Do you remember what bank?
I don't. I want to say Citibank, but I don't think
it was Citibank.
yeah,
But they said, and so I went out there, I said, oh, this thing needs everything. All the downstairs, only some of the downstairs were occupied.
Yeah.
They had to buy their own air conditioners.
Yeah, it was in bad shape.
He was in bad shape. So I made him a cash offer, a lowball cash offer, and surprise, surprise, it was accepted.
They took it, yeah. And you did very well. I mean, you turned around and spruced that property up.
Oh, it was gorgeous.
That was really impressive. Just 50 units, but that was a nice rehab property. It still looks good today.
Yeah, so that was our first deal that we did.
Yeah.
And right now you have listed one of our deals that we did. Which
That's
one is
right.
that?
Yeah, I sold you Villa Creek, so 162 units over in North Dallas in Farmers Branch, and a lot of interest. But again, Darwin, you took your whole process there, rehabbed it nicely, had a little bit of a weather event during your time.
Weather event. That's a polite way of saying a tornado hit it.
Correct. Yes, that's
Yes.
right. But getting a lot of interest, and you've turned that property around significantly in about 5 years.
Well, let's go through the whole process. Okay, so we get it up to the level we think it's ready to sell. Of course, we stay engaged with the brokers so that they look at it about every year, and so that Chris can look at it and say, this is where you are, this is what I think the valuation is. And we get to a point and then say, okay, now it's time to sell.
Right.
And we were looking at selling, but then last year a tornado hit it and ripped off roofs off of a few buildings, and nobody was hurt. We were out there within about 20 minutes of it hitting and getting everybody taken care of and getting it all safe and secure. But that put a delay on us listing it.
Yes.
So we call you and say, okay, we're ready to list it. What do you guys do on your side?
So right from the get-go, what we usually do is we'll get the financials from the ownership, from Darwin, the financials, a rent roll. If there's any sort of loan situation right now, We'll look at the loan docs, see if you have to assume it, or it's a good idea to assume it, or go all cash. Then what we'll do is we'll plug that into our, quote unquote, the model, and analyze it, a lot of different ways. We'll take your in-place actuals. If you're trending upwards in collections, then we'll extend that upward path forward, maybe 6 months, 12 months, something like that, and put together our pro forma, our projections. Hey, Mr. Buyer, if you buy this in the next 90 days, where are you going to be 12 months from there? What should you be collecting based upon certain improvements, certain rehab programs, that kind of thing. So we plug it in there.
You actually look at that when you analyze and say, wait a minute, you're paying too much for this or that. So you give some feedback. I mean, you've done it over the years.
Yeah.
Hey, this one's out of whack, this one's out of, why is your insurance high or whatever else? And,
right.
Well, it got hit by a tornado, so they raised our rates.
Yes.
Things like that pop up. But you go through and do a pro forma on how you think it should operate.
Right. So I mean, especially some of these older vintage properties, their water bill might be a little high because of leaky faucets. They haven't gone through a water reduction program, or they have some pipes that are leaking that aren't traceable, that kind of stuff. And we have engaged third-party vendors. We have an insurance provider. We have a tax protest consultant internally at CBRE that we can talk to find out what the taxes are projected to be. Water, electricity usage. So we, as many deals as we underwrite almost on a weekly basis, we can really understand kind of how the industry standard is for what water should be, even for this kind of vintage, water and sewer. And if it's high, hey, let's look into that and find out the reason.
Yeah, as just a quick sidebar is we had another property where we couldn't find a water leak. All the leak detection companies said, no, there is none. And we had this special company come out that does it with like a dye, an airborne dye, so that it'll actually percolate up through the ground.
Oh, wow.
And we found a water leak. It was 7 feet underground. Why'd they put a water line 7 feet? I have no idea.
Yeah.
But that was a quick sidebar, quick side note. But Villa Creek, how many showings have you done then? So basically you list it, you send it out to your database, then what happens?
So then we start getting inquiries, emails, texts, phone calls, and then we proactively make phone calls to kind of the usual suspects. Hey, I know you've bought a deal down the street, or you own a lot like this product. You want to take a look at this. And then what we do is we'll implement if it's not a tour program, then we will begin tours immediately and get them out there. We'll have a tour route. We usually select an upgraded unit, a classic unit, maybe a recently vacated unit, see the common areas, and we'll walk the prospective buyer through the same programs, through the same tour route over and over and over. So everybody gets the same presentation of that property. So like on Villa Creek, to answer your question, I think we've done 22 tours year to date, and we still have 2 more weeks of marketing.
Yeah, so our call for offers, well, today's date is...
Today's date is February 5th, and then the call for offers date is February 16th.
February 16th.
Yes.
So we've got 11 more days before we get offers in. And we do all that, well, there has been offers that came in to try and preempt the deal.
Yes.
And that's something that everybody does. That's what I try and do as well, rather than go through the whole call for offers. As a seller, I love it. As a buyer, I hate it, because I just want to know the price, and if I want to buy it, I'll buy it. But now it's price to market.
Yes.
So everybody has to bid on it, but they do get a little teaser called a whisper price. And what do you call what is a whisper price?
So a whisper price is a pricing based upon our underwriting. That's maybe a little more of an aggressive price, but we have to give some sort of guidance out there for people to kind of target to or shoot to or achieve or exceed. But there have been some government entities, the appraisal districts, they've gotten real savvy on, hey, if they're doing their homework every year to say, hey, what are these large properties worth, because they want to maximize their taxable benefits from it. So they sometimes get a hold of our marketing package, and if we tip our hat saying here's what we think it's worth, they'll use that whether the property sells or not. So we're always kind of conscious of that. So what we're doing is we're just saying, hey, the whisper price in a verbal situation is X. Even our underwriting and our financial pages, we'll just put in we'll take the T12 taxes and raise it maybe 5%. And in our financial notes, it just says, hey, we're putting in a placeholder.
Yep.
You as the buyer, my seller, just underwrite it accordingly to how you think the taxes are going to go after you purchase it. So everybody's aware that taxes are probably going to go up.
Do you think because of that we'll ever get back to priced assets where there's a price on it?
Yeah. In my opinion, how I kind of gauge it is if it's a smaller property, let's say it's under $5 million, I always lean towards pricing it because the type of investor that's going to be looking at that might have a day job, and he comes home from his day job and he puts out the marketing package or looks on his laptop across his dinner table. He needs that pricing guidance right then and there.
Yep.
Because we want as many eyeballs to look at the deals. But if it's a larger deal, then I think it's pretty much set in stone. You're going to see it going, price to market or to be determined kind of writing.
And that's as much to try and solicit people to bid on it and also to protect our downside for tax adjustments so that the taxing authority doesn't see what our broker thinks it's worth so that they can pay, so we can pay extra taxes.
Yeah, because nobody wants to pay more than they have to, whether it's the purchase price or taxes, on anything. Yeah.
Okay, so Villa Creek, we've had about 20 tours. Our call for offers is February 16th. And you had given a pricing range, right? You gave us a range and then a whisper price in there, hoping that they at least hit that, because the whisper price then, should we even say all that right now? Should we even say any of the pricing numbers?
I was not going to, if you wanted to, I was not going to put a number on record.
On record.
I mean, just, I don't know who's
going to listen to this,
yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Who's saying all that? But,
so. But we can talk about, we set a range and we have a whisper price in that range, and the way the market is right now, buyers are pushing past that range because of the story behind the property or something like that.
Yeah, and so, well, let's talk about that. Okay, so we have offers coming in on the 16th. We'll look at all those. We had a preemptive offer that was strong, with a lot of earnest money hard day one, but a little bit lower than we think we're going to be able to get after we get competitive bids.
Right. Well, and that's why you hire a listing broker, a national firm like ours, is that when we run the process at the end of the day as the seller, okay, I'm getting the highest price that the market is bearing right now, as well as the most qualified buyer.
Yep.
And so if we run through that whole process, then you know for sure, and talking to your partners, your passive investors, hey, I've done my job, here's what we're going to sell it for, this is the top of the market. And that's what you're looking for.
Well, let's give some advice to some potential buyers then,
Okay.
because I hate that process, because then a very qualified buyer might be bidding against a very unqualified buyer on price and terms alone. But it does give buyers like me a leg up because of track record and history and things like that. But and somebody coming into the market would have to be a lot more aggressive. So realistically, we're pulling back the curtain here and saying what really happens. What really happens? So we're going to get. We're going to expect. How many offers do you think we're going to get? We have about 20 showings so far. We'll probably have another 5 before. For that. So we'll have about 25 showings. How many people clicked through and looked at it?
We, as of yesterday, we had 221 signed CAs, and 358 people have looked at the website. CBRE's
okay, and for those who don't know what a CA is
a confidentiality agreement. So this is something they have to sign, saying that they're not going to take the material that we're providing and blast it all over to their list. They're responsible to just look at it for their eyes only.
Their eyes only, or their accountant, CPA, partners, whatever else. I mean, you're not huge sticklers over that. It's not like it's very dictatorial. But we had how many signed CAs?
221.
221 equates to about 25 tours, so about 10% of them are tours. And of those 25, how many offers do you think we'll get?
I mean, just Rule of thumb, probably
Roughly.
50%, so 12, 13, 14, something
Okay,
like that.
Okay, and those 12 or so we went from 240 to 25, so about 10%, and then about half of those, so we'll get about 5% of the people that looked at it, you're giving offers.
Correct, yeah.
Okay, and those would range, if we had a whisper price, I'm just going to throw numbers out here, these are not actual numbers. If we had a whisper price of $20 million, where do you think those 12 offers, what do you think the range would be on those offers?
So we'll have it never happens, we usually have a couple of offers that the person hasn't walked the property, we haven't really spoken to them, so we'll have some just unsolicited thrown in offers from that. So most people are aware, especially on a deal size like Villa Creek, they're savvy, they know the process, the procedure, because what we usually do is we'll have a call for offers. We just take all the offers in. Then we'll have a best and final round. That's where we, as the brokers, if we don't know somebody and they're new to the market, we need to study them, learn them, kind of interview them and
Right.
do our homework. So then we pick the best candidates to do one more round. So that being said, is the first round of offers could come in, I mean, especially on a Villa Creek where there's a good story, you'll still have offers that'll range, I would say anything from our whisper price, they might come in anywhere from about 10% of that whisper price. So you'd have some that are just below it and some that are pretty
So
far off.
19.8 to,
17 million.
well, no, from 20 million going,
Oh, 19.8 you would probably have a couple guys that are easily willing, but they're not going to show all their cards the first
Right.
round. So 19.8, and then they'll go down to like
up
8.
to 19.8 on a $20 million whisper, 19.8 to about 20 million too? On a $20 million
Not the
whisper.
first round. Usually everybody's kind of below it.
Everybody's
kinda-
below it on the
Yeah.
on the first round? Okay.
That's my opinion. But then when you get the people in the best and final, and some of these people are already asking, Chris, what's it going to take for us to get in the best and final? That's all they're trying to posture. They're just positioning and posturing.
Yep.
Then when we get in there and say, okay, sharpen your pencil. Here's an updated rent roll. Here's the latest financials. They start filling out the questionnaire. Where's your debt and equity coming from? That's when they go, okay, what's it going to take for us to get this deal? And then that's when you start coaching.
Okay, so $20 million whisper, they'll come in below that just to try and get, because there will be 12 offers. And you're going to look at those 12 offers and basically say, these guys here, they haven't even seen it, let's just wipe them out.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, if they don't even make, it's not a real offer if they
Right.
haven't even seen the property. So you wipe them out. Maybe you have a couple people in there that you know are flakes, or just put properties under contract just
Right.
to try and
Bad
tie it up.
experience, or they got a history.
Bad
Yeah.
experience, things like that. And then you'll narrow it down with price and terms to get what they call the best and final that you
Yes.
just said.
Yep.
And the best and final, of course, as a buyer, I hate this crap, is to bid against yourself to try and come up.
Yeah.
Now, do you give any guidance to those best and final people?
We really, that whisper price is set, but we don't give any numerical advice, but we say, hey, like for example, at 20 million, hey, Mr. Buyer, and we tell everybody pretty much the same thing, because we don't want to, it's really poor brokerage to shop another offer.
Yep.
So what we say is, hey, that 20 million offer, that's in play. We've already seen offers come in or whatever, but that 20 million is in play. So don't think, that's kind of the top. It's probably going to go past that.
Yep.
And then they also, they ask, well, how much? Well, I want you to go under contract or put a step forward on the pricing that you can go all the way to the distance and close on it. We don't want any, I overdid it, and so now I got to retrade you. I need to change the price after we go under contract. So we push them as ethically as we can, I guess,
Yep.
to exceed that whisper price, which in today's market, I would say in the past year, more than 50% of the time it goes past that whisper price.
Okay, good. And it also goes into your underwriting and what you whispered and
Yes.
everything. I mean, there's a lot of
Yeah.
psychology behind what you do to put it into a place where you do get as much competitive offers as you can.
Correct. Yeah, you don't want to just put a crazy number out there, because then everybody's like, well, I can't even get close to it, and nobody offers. And so, yeah, there is some psychology to the whole process. Yeah.
And going back to going back to that best and final, there's also, you mentioned a questionnaire. So let's talk about that a little bit. What is the questionnaire that you provide?
Sure.
And why?
So in the questionnaire, it's usually, at least ours is about a 2-page questionnaire where it's important questions that the seller would want to know. Hey, where's the debt going to come from? Have you gotten a quote? Have you worked with that mortgage broker or that lender before? Where's the equity coming from? Do you have a discretionary fund? Do you have the ability to make a decision on the fly for the buying entity? Are you in a 1031 exchange? What's your CapEx budget buying this property? All those questions that if I was the seller, if I was the owner, I would want to know who I'm going under contract with, because you're kind of getting married, let's call it, loosely, for the next potentially 90 days of, hey, I got to provide all the due diligence stuff that I have on this property. Who am I handing this due diligence stuff to? So I mean, it is a little bit of a quick short-term marriage kind of thing where you got to do it that way.
Exactly. Do you do interviews also?
So some owners like that and want to do it. Others are like, I don't want to do that. But it's very revealing to do phone interviews. So when we're in that best and final round, we might have 2 or 3 phone interviews with the candidates. So and those interviews have gone very well for a buyer and have not gone very well for a buyer.
So then you're putting on your sales hat, in other words, as a buyer and saying why you're so great.
Yes, yeah. Here's why I'm interested in, and the seller is kind of probing too. Are you real? How do you present yourself on the phone? Do you sound polished, professional? Are you a company, or are you just starting out kind of thing? Those are all things that easily are seen even on a phone call.
In your experience, does the highest price always get the deal?
No. So, I mean, we look at that. We do have, we kind of know, everybody probably in the brokerage community knows that there's a couple of investors that come in, high-flying offers kind of thing, but their ability to close and go the distance is, iffy. So we just want to go with the buyer that's going to be the highest probability, but at the same point, we have to work with our client, saying, hey, if there is this high offer, we're not, we're telling you right up front, Mr. Owner, that we can go down the road with this higher offer, but it's probably going to be a bumpy road, and at the end, we're not sure if they can really perform.
Right, and as a seller, we want to go under contract with somebody who's going to be a performer.
Yes, on time. Yeah.
On time, do everything they're going to say they're going to do, not retrade, things like that. And in a market like this that we've been in for about 5 or 6 years, the big thing on that is hard earnest money.
Yes.
Okay, so talk about how what kind of carve outs they look for, what kind of, which is basically their outs, and how much percentage wise and how that looks. How does because the hard earnest money from a seller is, are they going to do it? And if they put up enough money, they can't retrade because we just get to keep it. So explain the psychology of the hard earnest money and how that comes into play in getting a deal accepted.
So hard earnest money, just to define it, is earnest money that you put up when you go under contract. You put it in the title company, you put earnest money in there. That earnest money, the way Darwin and I are using that, is that money is non-refundable. So if you go under contract, you open up escrow, and a day later, for whatever reason, you get sick, don't want to do the deal anymore, that earnest money, the amount that's non-refundable, you don't get back. It goes to the owner. So what that does is it ties in, it shows a level of commitment from the buyer saying, here's how bad I really want this deal. And I've toured it, I've studied it, I know the market, I know what I'm getting myself into. So I'm willing to put up this amount of earnest money day one to show our level of commitment. In regards to looking at the way the market is right now in the last 5 years, like you said, is every property that you put on the market that a broker markets, you're going to get multiple offers. And so, obviously price is one, the ability to perform is probably two, but the amount of hard earnest money is probably a close three. And the percentage wise, it can be, we've had deals where they put up maybe 5 or 6% of earnest money, non-refundable day one, hundreds of thousands of dollars, and in one case it was $1 million. So they really wanted that deal. Usually we see more of like anywhere from, I would say, 0.5% to 1% of earnest money going non-refundable day one.
Okay.
And that being said, I would say on average what we're seeing with non-refundable earnest money is we have a couple of carve-outs that we would call it. Usually it's 3, is if the title commitment is clouded. For some reason the property can't sell to anybody.
Right.
There's something wrong with the survey, there's a bad easement or something like that, or an encroachment. And then something with the environmental. Usually there's a phase 1 environmental done on the property, and if there is, I say this jokingly, but it gets the point across, if plutonium is found underneath the property, there could be some issues. So with those 3 carve-outs, other than that earnest money is non-refundable.
Yeah, and on the title and survey items, that would be something that the seller can't overcome.
Correct. It's out of his control.
It's out of his control, and it would cause them not to be able to close.
Yeah.
Because it's more of a seller default type of thing.
Correct.
And the environmental is more along the lines of a huge potential expense, liability, or
Yes.
a lender that's not willing to loan on it. If a lender's not willing to loan on it.
That gets tough.
But if it already has agency debt or some other debt, generally those things are not issues, correct?
Very true. That's, and a lot of these deals right now have that agency debt on it. So in the past, let's call it 3 or 4 or 5 years that the owner has bought it, that the agency, Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac, has done their homework. Mm-hmm. So unless something drastically has changed in the current ownership, it looks like that would be a high probability that you could get a loan and there wouldn't be any consequences.
Wouldn't be a problem. Okay, so we go through, we got the best and final, and coming from a seller's point of view, get that list, he breaks it all down in a spreadsheet, price, earnest money, option period, due diligence, closing, all the good stuff, who they are, and then we go through and talk about them and pretty much take, okay, the lowest prices or the least qualified, let's go ahead and knock those out and let's talk about the top 2 or 3.
Correct.
And we'll go through and I'll ask questions because I don't know them and say, okay, did this guy perform? Do you have any experience with him?
Right.
Or did you have any experience with them? And sometimes it's, yes, I've sold them 10 deals. And that's a huge, huge
box.
star. Yeah,
Yeah.
check that
Yeah.
box.
Yeah.
They've performed. They've performed a lot in Arizona or California or something like that.
Yeah.
And you haven't worked with them. It's like, okay, a little bit of a mark off that one. And so you go through each one of them. And that's when we're picking. So it's not necessarily about price and terms, because all that gets tightened up and they're all real close. It really gets down to reputation.
It does. That is very key. That's very important. We have, at least in dealing with CBRE, an international firm, we have sent out a blast email to the multifamily community, the CBRE multifamily brokers from Seattle to Miami and elsewhere. Hey, have you ever heard of this group? Have you ever worked with this group? Yeah. And sure enough, you'll get 2 or 3 emails come back. Oh yeah, they're really good. They bought a deal in Seattle last year. We're very pleased. We've had a couple of incidences where the broker says, oh, I've invested in this group on a deal they bought in San Jose or whatever. So these little caveats, these little comments, they go a long way in regards to talking to an owner about who this group
and painting
is.
a whole picture, because
yes.
we are essentially getting married for that period of time. We want to make sure that they're going to do what they say they're going to do, and so we want to get any background we can.
Exactly. Yeah, and that's, it's good to go on their website and Google them and that kind of stuff, but if you can get a little more granular on who we're dealing with here, that goes a long way.
So if you're dealing with, you're up against, let me phrase, somebody's up against, they're in the best and final, meaning their price and whatever salesmanship that they got to get them into that best and final.
Yeah.
I know I've been put in the best and final even though my offer was way too low before, just because of reputation.
That's a good thing.
It's a good thing, exactly. But then it'll be, I've seen it also happen where it's down to 2 buyers and they're both extremely tight and they've already done their best and final, and we're like, well, we need to have somebody push them over the edge.
Yeah.
You ever go back to those 1 or 2 and say, we'd really like to go with you, but you're earnest money's too low, or do you go back for one more round to squeeze
Address,
in?
yeah, we have. And when it gets down to that, push comes to shove, there's a lot of quick phone calls, quick conversations, and the whole thing could happen in an hour or two.
Yeah.
Because when they're, usually by then they know the environment that they're competing against and the situation that they're in. So, we really take the lead off of our client, how hard we want to push, because at the same point, we've done the best and final, and that just in its word is best and final, but at the same point, if somebody's wanting to go up a couple $100,000 more, let's say for whatever reason, we want to take advantage of that for our client to get the maximum price.
And do buyers tell you that, saying, here's my best and final, but if I'm just real close?
Let me know.
Do they ever do that?
Yeah.
Every day?
It's pretty often, and you get that
I know,
sense.
I've done
Yeah,
that.
that's right.
So I've done that. Here's my best and final, but if we're close, you
Yes.
can squeeze me
Let
a
me
little
know.
bit more.
Yeah.
But then you've got a fiduciary responsibility to your client, who
Yes.
is the seller,
Yes.
to go ahead and tell them, hey, they'll come up. So as a buyer, we're kind of shooting ourselves in the foot, but
it's a give and take. It is by far, it's an art, and by no means a science. So it's fun and exciting, but everybody comes to the table with their own experiences and their own desires or needs or whatever in this transaction, and you don't know how that is until everybody shows their cards at the end of the moment.
yeah, it's time to lay it all out. Everybody's betting, and
Yes.
now, Jay, show your cards. I like
go.
that analogy.
Yeah.
I like to play poker, so I like that
There
analogy.
you go. That's right. Yeah.
And if you don't put enough in, you're automatically out, and you know
Yeah.
what? You just messed up. You played it wrong.
Yeah.
How is somebody that's trying to compete? Let's just take a small syndicator, relatively new, trying to do this, trying to get in and get a deal, and they're up against more experienced players. What can those syndicators or those buyers do to move them up that list?
A couple of things that we've seen in those situations is speed of responsiveness. If we ask a question or whatever like that, and they go, "Let me get back to you on it," for whatever reason that is, and you're asking the less experienced buyer, if they can respond quick, that's more important, because that's how we're going to see that in the escrow process, doing it that way. References are key, whether it's a broker or a mortgage broker or heck, even your mom or something like that. Just who, here I've performed in the past, and here's references. Call them. Here's a letter of recommendation. That goes a long way. You have to introduce yourself as somebody that can do exactly what I'm saying I'm doing or able to do. So I think that goes a long way. That's a non-monetary way to elevate your ability.
And we have utilized all those. I've called in. There was a property I was trying to buy. Actually, a property in Fredericksburg. It was with an agent that I had never dealt with before.
Okay.
They didn't know my history, and so I sent out an email to a bunch of the brokers we did business with, and I got 10 comments back from brokers that were all good, that I could send them back. Here, talk to any of these
Yes.
agents. They can tell you,
I think I
all
wrote
about
one
what
for you on
you-
that one. I
you
remember.
did.
I think you did. Yeah.
You did. I
Yeah.
think we're going to put it in our new brochure we're working on right now.
There you go.
We'll have a
Impressive.
pretty picture of you.
Nice. There
So
you go.
who are you going to have a stand in?
I was going to say Brad Pitt, George Clooney.
Brad Pitt. Okay, I'm put a Brad Pitt picture there. That'll fly. Yeah.
That would work.
You might
yes.
get some extra business.
See, that's right. Yeah, man, that guy looks like Brad Pitt. Geez, so yeah. I
Okay,
wish.
so they go through, they do that, they get the best and final. The seller makes a decision. How much time between making that decision and getting a contract is reasonable?
I would say 7 to 10 days is usually what everybody shoots for. That's the other thing is the ability to I've been around long enough that I kind of know who the lawyers are and who's that kind of stuff, and so that kind of goes a long way.
Yeah. Who's your lawyer is part of the questionnaire?
Yeah, no, but at least a verbal. But where you find out, is this guy going to be responsive, or is he swamped, or does he have a lot of staff and he's not really going to redline the contract? That can be, it's maybe a comment that I need to address to my client, saying, hey, just negotiating the contract might take a little longer.
Would it help if rather than a LOI they provided a contract?
We have had that. in the best and final, with the questionnaire, the owner sends, here's a draft of our contract that has been, filled in for this transaction. Please look it over and provide feedback with the questionnaire. That has gone a long way also, because that at least we get the key business points, the seller's reps and warranties and all this kind of stuff. We find out if there's going to be a big hiccup in the negotiating of that contract. That might be something we need to think about.
That is a really good idea. Us provide the contract as part of the best and final,
Right.
and quite honestly, if you're not going to redline it at all, that's a huge thing.
Yeah, because we've had situations, and it could be one that we consider, is we send out the contracts, please mark it up, sign it, send it back.
Yeah.
So then exactly, it's teed up right there. So as the owner, you might have 3 to 5 contracts laid out in front of you. That's the contract.
Yep.
This one's redlined a lot. This one's a little. This guy didn't do anything. And then you really are in control of the transaction all the way until you execute the contract that you want to execute. And at that point, his money, he's got to wire in the money. But at that point, when the contract goes into the title company, and his earnest money goes in there, it's hard.
It's done. Yes.
Yeah. So then you are in complete control, Mr. Owner of the property, up until his earnest money is non-refundable.
Right. And how long is normal between, yes, you got the deal and we have an executed contract? I mean, you say it should be about 7 days, but there could be things, there are some contracts that are extremely one-sided.
Yeah.
That take time to go ahead and do. That's one of the things that really perturbs me is, yes, I'm going to go ahead and award you the deal to go ahead and buy this, but now it takes us 3 weeks to negotiate a contract. It's like, wait a minute, do you want to buy it or not?
Yeah, yeah.
And so that's one of the things that the speed of getting that contract back. So somebody that's new or trying to be a little more aggressive can provide a contract or ask you for a contract. You've got a standard CBRE contract, right?
Yes, yeah. And we use the North Texas Commercial Association of Realtors contract. It's a little more check the box and fill in the blank kind of contract, but it's a simple one and it covers the bases.
And it's pretty fair.
Yeah,
pretty fair.
Yeah. Promulgated, third party, written up. So that's one that people have said, okay, well, let's fill that in, and then they've got an addendum attached to it that has tons of comments on it and that kind of stuff. But yeah, I mean, the contract is, we've seen it to where it takes 3-4 weeks, and it's 110 pages and that kind of stuff. So it's a challenge.
What about early access or anything like that? What else do people ask for?
Yeah.
In that scenario?
And I was going to mention that it's that with the money nowadays, it's very common for people to have non-refundable earnest money day one. So then to kind of circumvent that a little bit, hey, Mr. Seller, can you give me anywhere from, let's call it 3 to 7 business days of an access agreement? So while we're negotiating that contract, that we can get access to the property. So, in our situation, it's usually, yes, you can, but it's just the vacants. You can walk all the common areas. You can send your contractors out there to get bids to adjust your CapEx budget. What we have noticed that what we would prefer to do is say, okay, no, let's go ahead and execute the contract, and then we will just give you anywhere from 3 to 5 business days inside from the effective date. So the clock is ticking, so he can do whatever he wants. He needs to hustle. And then on the 5th day after the effective date, his money is, if he doesn't cancel, it's non-refundable. Okay. That way he has that little access agreement, but he's on the clock. Where if we grant an access agreement before we sign the contract, we've seen those drag out for 3 weeks. It's like a free look for 3 weeks, and there's no contract. So we still want to
sign the contract. You can have the early access, and go ahead and look how many times, percentage-wise, how many times do they want an access agreement?
Half.
Half?
I would say half.
And of those half, how many times does something come up that causes the deal to get sideways?
A third.
A third? Okay.
Something like that, yeah. And it's usually, I don't think I've ever had a deal fall apart during that access agreement, but it's just usually a discussion or a conversation. Some of it is hey, the roofs are shot, and usually the seller knows that, we're like, okay, well, go get a bid, that kind of thing. So it helps speeds the process up a little bit, because one of the things that I've learned over my career is the more that you can provide the documentation that a seller feels comfortable providing, like while they're looking at the deal, that just makes the whole process so much smoother. So if you do have a bad roof, or wiring is bad, or foundation, or we had a fire, lost run reports for insurance, any of that stuff that can be provided up front or told or disclosed, the buyer can't come back on that and say, hey, look, I didn't know the roofs were shot. So it helps just the whole process be so much smoother.
Are there any acceptable items that come up that would be warranted for a retrade?
I guess probably the only thing would be where, during the due diligence period, the buyer finds something that the seller didn't know. Yeah. I would say from past experiences, if there is, that's not even a good one. Well, I guess, I wouldn't even tell that was a good retrade. The chimneys, so this was an apartment complex where the chimneys, it was an 80s vintage product, and the chimney, the wood holding up the inside of the chimney had rotted because it was stucco, and so the chimneys had started to lean towards the buildings.
Okay.
And so it wasn't enough to where like an owner would see, geez, something's wrong with the chimneys. But if you really stood back and looked at them, they were leaning. So, the buyer said, hey, we're gonna have to fix this. These chimneys are gonna fall down, crater, or whatever. This is something, it's structural, we're gonna have to go in there and do it. So that was a topic of conversation for a potential retrade. That's I guess an example.
That is a very good example. Was something like that able to be retraded, or did the seller pretty much say, no, as is, where is, per the contract?
Sure. So they asked for a pretty big number, and we went back and forth, and they got something, but it was like maybe a third of what they originally asked for.
Yeah, but still, the seller knows, hey, we're already under contract.
Yes.
You've got non-refundable money. I'm going to have, I now know about this. I'm probably going to have to disclose it, or at least Chris will to any new buyer.
Yeah.
And so they're going to adjust that anyway. So I've got a bird in the hand. I may as well work with them.
Yeah, because if we, because if we do the marketing process, you do a best and final. When you pick a buyer, you go back and tell all the people that did make offers, saying, hey, sorry you didn't get it. They awarded it to another person. So they know the process is now over. Mm-hmm. So then all of a sudden, if they see it back out on the market, psychologically there's a different mindset there. Let's revisit this property. Yeah, why did they? That would be the first question that we field is, why did it fall out?
So another reason to pick the right buyer the first time.
Yes.
And a little bit of motivation to help get, if there is something that's discovered like that.
Yes.
To work on that.
Yeah.
We've got a property under contract, and the roof looked good from the street. Got up there, it was just worn out, and it was $200,000 expense. Luckily, we had a lot of cushion in our CapEx dollars, but went back to the seller, and those, he's like, okay, well, you know what, I'll pay for half.
Yeah.
So to split the difference. Because he knows that if he's going to go through and do it, he's going to have to at least come off half anyway, and we've already got somebody there ready to do it.
And you guys have negotiated the contract. You're getting your debt lined up.
It's already 30 days in, and we're getting ready to close. So.
Well, that's the definition of due diligence. So I need to go kick the tires, so to speak. I need to test drive this property.
But most buyers right now, because of hard earnest money, they've got to go out and they walk the property beforehand. We walk it with our contractors, property management, and then we have to make assumptions that we think that we're going to do that. And usually I'm a little too conservative on my numbers, and so that gets me out of running.
Helps you out,
well, it doesn't help me out. It hurts me on that part of it. But if I get the deal, then the underwriting. So go back to that questionnaire. Just circling back real quick to that. Why is it you get their CapEx budget? Why is it you get their underwriting? Why is it that you ask for those things?
So we like to make it's one of those things before we go under contract. Hey, are you kind of underwriting this right? The CapEx budget's probably the most common question, because if they go through their due diligence and we've had conversations where So what's your CapEx budget? Oh, we're just going to use the cash flow off the property to reinvest into the property. That makes us nervous. But if they go, well, we're budgeting $1.5 million because we're going to do this, this, and this to it. Okay, that makes me feel comfortable, because there are individuals out there that if there's just a trip hazard or a little bit of wood rot on one of the buildings, they bring that up and it's a whole topic of conversation, and it's maybe a $50,000 fix. But you're buying a $20 million property, let's say. Didn't you budget that, Mr. Buyer? So that's what we want to know.
You gave me your CapEx budget, and it's already covered in there. You got
Yes.
plenty in there. You don't need to try and retrade me.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's if the seller is doing kind of a full disclosure on, here's the property, we're selling it, here it is, make an offer. But at the same point, the seller should receive full disclosure from the buyer on, hey, here's me, and here's how I'm going to buy the property. Are you okay with that? And because then they know each other going into the contract process, full disclosure, and that's helpful.
So I like your term again. It's a marriage.
Yes.
It's not a fight. You guys are
Yes.
going together to get the deal done.
There you go.
So you got to make sure that you're going to be, for lack of a better term, you're going to be in bed with somebody that you trust and that's going to do everything they're saying you're going to do, et cetera, rather than having a contentious agreement. We're all working together to get this thing closed. So as a broker, you're a matchmaker.
Yeah.
Saying this
You're
guy's
the
not a good
justice
deal
of the
for
peace.
you. So you're doing that, making sure
Yeah.
everybody's coming together and going to do that.
Yeah.
So they go through, do the due diligence. They're arranging financing. They are doing that. How often are they back on the property going to do the buyers? How often are they visiting the property after it's under contract? And what are they doing besides the due diligence? Well, actually, let's talk about that. Due diligence, so they send in either a due diligence company or they come walk the units themselves, or and they have their contractor come walk everything. What else do they do?
So, and you've kind of covered it all. What I think we see from experienced investors is that they will set everything up beforehand. So they'll ask for rent roll, site plans, floor plans, and they will, with technology, you have almost everybody's walking up there with their iPads, and they've got the units that they're going to walk, and they've got to check the box. How's the plumbing? How's the carpet? How's the walls? How's the, is it good, fair, poor? That kind of thing. And so there's a lot of upfront prep. So when they come on the property, I think a lot of them are trying to do them all, let's say, in a day or two. So they'll want to walk every unit, and this may be before COVID, but even after COVID now, they're walking every unit, and they're auditing the leases. Then they also are having their third-party contractors. So you might have a roofer, an electrician, a foundation guy out there. All of them are out there the same day. Okay. And so that they really try and, buyers are respectful because it is, running an apartment complex is a business, so they want to make as much less intrusion as they can. So they might come out there during the due diligence period maybe 3 times. You'll have one kind of big event. You might have up to a dozen people
Everybody
out there.
yep.
Yeah. Then you'll have the lender will come visit. Then you'll have an appraiser come visit. And then you might have one more visit, to tighten up the CapEx budget or something like that.
Property condition report, though,
Yes,
a third party, they'll
yep.
come out and do that and walk certain units. The lender will walk
Yes.
certain units. Let's see here. So they'll have maybe an environmental. You'll get a phase 1. That's all on paper. If they need to do something more.
Yeah, lenders try nowadays. They try and set them up to where all 3 of them, the appraiser, the environmental, and the property condition report for the lender, they try and put all them together so they're all out there together, walking units, same units, and it's done. Yeah. So I think COVID has made things a lot more efficient in regards to interacting with other people on the property.
Yeah, people don't want to have people coming into their units
Right.
and things like that, and that'll
Yes.
have a lot of pushback, a lot of problems.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going through the process. We're doing that. When should that buyer have engaged their lender, by the way?
Way at the beginning, even before the beginning. So if they haven't, a lot of people have existing relationships, but then if they don't, they need to, preferably before they make the offer, get some sort of quote, some sort of sizing of the loan that they could get for this property. So they would show the marketing package, the financials, and a rent roll to their mortgage broker or their lender saying, hey, what kind of loan can I get on this? And by the way, here's what I'm wanting to do to the property. So they might offer them a couple of options with Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac, or a bank loan, or a bridge loan, or a HUD loan, or a life company loan. So there's a lot of options to navigate through that. So talking to a lender up front, you'll know exactly what kind of debt you're going to get. So how much equity am I going to need on the deal? All that is very important before you make an offer.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah. And just on the lending side, CBRE has their own lending arm?
They do, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when you put together your OM, your offering memorandum, you're actually running that by your debt group too. So you have a debt quote in your OM, correct?
We are. We use the debt quote. We kind of put a generic one in there a little more, just because we don't know what everybody else's approach is going to be on the property. But then we have our debt contact information in the marketing package, so they can easily reach out to them. They've already sized the deal, so we've shown them the T12. And if they haven't toured the property, they've at least driven by the property. So when they're sitting down and talking to our CBRE debt team, that it's not just a desk level analysis. They've actually gone into and analyzed the property.
And we didn't talk about that, but how does the seller go through and contact their lender or CBRE, or do you have a contact that can say, hey, they've already been through and provided their financials, things like that? They've already, using pre-qualified, I know you don't really get pre-qualified in commercial, but do you look at that to see if they've already taken those steps?
We do. So it really depends on that buyer. Sometimes they don't want to show their, what's it called, proof of funds. It's not a PFS. What's it, private? Your personal financial statement. Yeah. So some of them.
Too used to acronyms. Now you don't even know what they stand for.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. but if they can provide that information beforehand, then they can really get a solid quote, interest rate. You know, how much I owe, recourse or non-recourse. I mean, that. Boy, if they do that, and even if it's just not for that property, they almost should have that teed up with their mortgage broker beforehand. So when, hey, I need to look at this deal, they already know the credit worthiness of the buyer.
Yeah, and because your team has already looked at the property, they know the property. A lot of times they'll know the buyers. I know I use Old Capital a lot for lending, and a lot of times I'll call them on a property, and he'll go through and, okay, oh yeah, it sold last year, 5 years ago for this amount. This was the buyer, this was the seller.
Yeah.
These are some other things we ran across. I mean, so it's I love it because it's such, commercial real estate is such a team effort. Everybody getting to the same goal. It's kind of like every time you're going to go buy another property, you're drafting your own fantasy football team, and you're going out there. Who's the broker going to be? Who's the lender going to be? Who's the due diligence? Who's the management company? Who are your partners? Who are your KPs?
Yeah.
And you know, you assemble your dream team, and then that
Put
gets
them on
you
the field.
best. Exactly.
Yeah.
I love that analogy. Okay, so they go through. They're doing their debt. They get over to closing, and how often are contracts extended? Because usually a contract would be a 30-30 plus 15 usually. So
that's what we're seeing on typically. And the big, I would say, to see on the back end if they're extended or not, hey, you know, when did they make loan app? And sometimes that's in the contract or even the LOI. You know, buyer needs to make loan application within the first 5 days of being under contract. If they do that and show proof to at least the broker, maybe to the owner, hey, we submit our loan application for debt, then we can feel pretty comfortable that they won't need that extension. But I would say more often than not right now with COVID, that seems to be pushing everything out like another 10 days, which 60 days is a good number to pursue, but you know, 70 days, something like that.
And percentage-wise, in the last year, percentage-wise, how many contracts extended?
I would say about half.
About half?
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to go back and say 30-30 plus 15. I'm going to, the way that is that's usually 30 days due diligence, which with hard earnest money, you're buying the property, whether you're doing due diligence or not. So it doesn't really matter what you find for the most part on that due diligence.
Yeah.
Because usually that 30-day due diligence is before money goes hard. And of course that's pre-2015.
Yes, yeah, true.
But 30-day look and then 30-day close. So it gives 60 days for a lender to close that. And if there's a problem, they can extend for another 14 days, 15 days, something like that, for additional earnest money. And so we found that especially during COVID, there's been a lot of extensions.
Yes. Yeah.
And the sellers, they understand that too.
They get it. And to comment just on what you said, it's usually the extension is, use the word problem. It's usually not like a problem. It's just slower.
Paperwork pushing.
Yes,
People are working from home and they're
the deal is still going to get handled, but the lender just needs more time.
Yes, the lender just needs more time on that. Usually, that's what it's for.
Yes.
And that happens quite a bit. So I know a lot of people, they get very freaked out. Oh no, it's not closing on. No, look, think about it from the seller's point of view. They've gone down this process, well, for 60 days with you.
Yes.
And before that, they took 30 days to pick you. So they're down this thing. They're not going to start all over generally. They're not going to turn around and say, you know what, enough's enough. They're going to say, if it's an extra 2 weeks, I understand, because a lot of times they've needed it themselves, things like that. But how often does it happen where, we need a 15-day extension or a 30-day extension, and the seller's saying, hey, you've got non-refundable earnest money up, close or I'm going to keep your earnest money. Does that ever happen?
It's been threatened, but it's never been executed, I should say. And that's happened more, not recently, but I would say, pre kind of 2015-ish, there was a little more of that, tighter pressure. It's like, look, this is the contract, I'll take your earnest money. So I think there's a little more, there's a lot less of that nowadays.
Everybody understands.
Everybody kind of gets it.
A little more on island time.
And going through the escrow process, it's not like a vacuum. I mean, there is constant communications, or there should be, between at least the broker and the buyer. Hey, I noticed the third parties were out on the property. One of those reports due back to the bank, and how often are they going to review it? Has he rate locked? When does he take this to committee? Or the pre-committee, that kind of stuff. So, if there's a process to it. So if they're hitting all those milestones, and it's like, hey, Mr. Seller, at the end of 60 days, he's doing everything. He's not, he hasn't gone.
And you're keeping track of that,
right? Yes, and you keep the seller in the loop. Yeah. Hey, he just made loan app. Hey, the appraisal came back fine. We're good. But this is the timing of all that stuff. So it's communication and full disclosure. It makes the whole process. Nobody should be able to be startled or shocked or surprised if something comes up out of nowhere.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I want to ask you a question now.
Yes.
So a lot of we're not on this side, or we don't see it this side, but when you put a deal on the market and you go through the process, let's say you're at the end of the 60 days of being under contract, from a seller's perspective, how much, roughly, in your experience, how much money or cost or expense are you incurring from marketing, having representation out there to do the tours and fixing up the property to make it look presentable, talking to your lawyer, negotiating the PSA with legal fees, providing the due diligence, putting it in a Dropbox or however it's presented. I mean, what kind of cost do you usually incur as a seller going through this marketing and escrow process?
It's actually really hard to quantify because most of it is staff time that we already have on payroll. So it's not really a huge expense. So really not a lot. Legal fees, we could pull out legal fees because there's a lot of that in negotiating the contract. I'm assuming, so you're saying, if I were to pull out, what do I lose?
Right, yeah, if he has, I need 15 more days because the lender, just needs more time, you go, well, we're going to put it back on the market and go find another buyer. What kind of cost is that from a seller's perspective?
Well, time value of money. So just the time that you have invested in that, especially if you're looking at another property for an exchange or putting the capital to work somewhere else, there could be those opportunity costs. Legal fees, the biggest thing is headache and having everybody run through all of the traps, providing all the due diligence, walking with all those tours. We have the president of our management company go walk on all the tours on the property.
Which is great to have, but I know that's time consuming.
But I mean, it's time consuming for him. The staff, the interruption of the staff helping do those turns and walking units and coordinating due diligence and doing all that. It's just a waste of time.
Yeah.
Is really the biggest thing. And if we turn around and let's just take Villa Creek. We have it under contract for $20 million, just picking numbers out of the air.
Sure.
And they've got $300,000 non-refundable, and it gets down 60 days and they need more time. It's like, I don't want to go through that headache again. I don't want to go do that. There's a certain dollar there that we're saying, you know what, if it's X amount, then yeah, we can play with that. But if we had very strong offers and now we're getting more offers and the property performance has gone better in those 60 days and we think we can get more money, and we say, you know what, if you don't perform, we can just keep your earnest money, and so we made an extra $300,000 and we can go get $20,500,000.
Right, another 500.
Well,
on that, yeah.
that's when we might be a little bit more hard-nosed about about saying, hey, no, we're not going to do this. We told you about this. We told you about this.
Right.
You already knew. I don't care if you can't raise the rest of the money or whatever else. But generally speaking, it was a marriage. It takes a lot to actually dissolve that.
Yeah.
I mean, here's the little thing. If they've been upfront and honest and working through this and they're just having a challenge, it's kind of like, you know what? We've all been there. We all know what it is.
Right.
We're here to help get the deal done. We're happy with the returns we're going to get. We don't want to go through and go through this headache again.
Yeah.
And even though performance might be up, it's the same stigmatism that you said, wait a minute, it fell out. Why?
Why? Yeah.
And of course we can tell that if it's the buyer flaked, he couldn't raise his money, whatever else.
And there's reasons that are kind of bad reasons, and then there are good reasons.
Something I love about this business is everybody's trying to get to the same goal. Yes, there might be negotiations and things like that.
Yeah.
But generally speaking, as a syndicator, all of our investors, they're investing a whole lot of money in this, so they're already sharp. They've got good business acumen. They're already smart about this. And so we've found that we tell the good, the bad, and the ugly, whatever it is, and they understand, oh yeah, it's a problem. Somebody who's never dealt with problems before,
they can freak out.
Yeah. Or I'm going to lose all this money, or I'm going to do this, and it's like, no, it's all negotiable. We can still work through this.
Yeah.
Everybody's on the same page. So if you communicate that to partners, brokers, whoever else, it's, hey, put all the cards out on the table, because this is what it is. Here's what we have to work with, and let's come to the best solution for all of us.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's those the greedy or the difficult people that really screw up deals, in my opinion.
Yeah. Yeah. They want to get that little extra dollar.
Yeah.
Savings wise. So do you, from a partnership, a passive investor, that kind of stuff from that partnership, how often do you communicate with them on a regular basis when you own a property, let's say 5 years, how often are you communicating with them saying, here's how we're performing, here's how we're doing, what's our plan, here's our strategy?
Well, at a bare minimum, it's every month. Every month we send out a full accounting package with a narrative and all the supporting reports and all the KPIs, et cetera. So we send all that out every month, usually along with a check. So we do distributions monthly.
Okay.
And so we send that out. Now, if there's a problem or something going on, we usually, we'll do other supplemental emails. But we send out the financials monthly. We also have a monthly meeting. It used to be live and then recorded and sent out, but now we're broadcasting them because of COVID.
Yeah.
But we have a monthly meeting that we do that. We've got 2 investor relations people, so if anybody has any questions at any time, they can reach out to them and get answers. So communication is huge, absolutely huge with partners. We've got 500 active partners, and communication, that's the biggest thing they want, is communication.
Yeah.
It's not about whether or not you encounter a problem, it's how you address it. And you definitely don't want to hide it.
Right.
Oh, and you got to think about your single biggest partner is your lender.
Yes.
anything happens, we're telling the lender first. That's the first phone call. Hey, the property just got hit by a tornado. Just wanted you to know in case you see it on the news, anything like that. We've already cleaned up the property. We've already secured it. We've already made sure the residents that are displaced are taken care of, yada, 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 yada. So always communicate with your lender. They're your biggest partner.
That's right.
And they're the same thing. They're business people also, especially lenders. They've seen thousands of deals and thousands of problems.
Yeah.
They know.
Yeah, yeah. And they might have a better solution than what you thought of, like a tornado hitting a building or something.
Yeah, they might
Well,
say, what about this or this or this? Or we've done these things before. So it's all a team effort.
Yes.
That's what's great.
That's right.
Because I could even call you, for example, on Villa Creek, we have something happen. Hey, we've got this. Do you know anybody that handles this type of problem?
Yes. Or,
how does this affect our value? Or during, for the last few years, when you've looked at it a couple times a year, how are we doing? Where can we increase? So it's really you're an undervalued asset to the owners because you want to be there to sell it.
Yeah, yeah.
So you want to stay involved and you want to know what's going on. You want to analyze that and saying, hey, you're off here, you're off here. Hey, your payroll's a little out of whack.
Yeah, when you have that history of it, I mean, I kind of don't like the word broker. I would much rather be like a consultant. And on Villa Creek's a prime example. Keeping in kind of communication quarterly or bi-monthly or whatever, we're more of a consultant, like you say. It's like, well, Darwin, I see your water bill is starting to spike, or here's what's happened here, or that property up the street or down the street, they've tried this or they're implementing this kind of rehab program. You might have a little bit of a sucking sound from your property going over to the newly rehabbed property. So it's
because they're
awareness
putting
and disclosure.
Yeah, and you're looking at deals every day, so you're saying, hey, wait a minute, they had a really good idea. They did these things.
Yes.
Or they did this. Or one of the things that's on my list eventually, I don't know if it'll ever come up, is take the fireplaces out and put in the electronic ones.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a value add thing. They've got a remote to turn on a fireplace. You don't have the soot, you don't have the problems, you don't have any of those. And now it's a fun amenity.
Yes.
I don't think anybody's doing that, but that is, if somebody started doing that, for example, then you could turn around and say, hey, the property up the street is doing this, and I know that this other broker is the one that's got their fingers in that pie.
Yeah.
So I want to make sure that you're keeping up with this so you have a higher valuation. Of course, the higher value we get, eventually, you're going to, we're all going to look at it and say, wait a minute, time to sell it.
Yes. Yeah.
And you've been right there helping advise and consult the whole time and do that.
Yeah. We are definitely not a fee and me brokerage shop, for sure.
Fee and me, I like that. That's an interesting one.
Roger Staubach said that once.
Did he?
So, yeah.
Yeah, I'm not a fan.
Oh, sorry. Okay. Somebody else said it.
Somebody else said it. Okay, yeah. Okay. But let's switch gears because that's pretty much the whole process, getting to closing. You ever have a commissionectomy?
No.
No? Have you heard that term?
I have not. Is that like,
Do you go to closings?
I've been to one in my 21 years of doing it. And sure enough, the guy retraded my commission.
Commissionectomy,
So
that's
I'm like,
right.
I'm not doing this anymore.
Yeah, so brokers don't like to go to the closings because if there's anything off, go back to the brokers.
Yes.
They're the ones getting a big fee. They're the
biggest
ones
number on that settlement statement.
on that settlement is that commission. And not only that, psychologically, Chris is having a closing today and he's going to get a check for X. Psychologically, he's already spent that.
Yes.
He's already told his wife about the new car they're going to buy with this closing or anything like that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
psychologically, you want to get everybody heavily invested in the transaction.
So in the day of closing, when everybody's supposed to get paid, everybody's
you're holding it up because you're not going to give up 30 grand.
right. Yeah.
Yeah,
How does that make you feel? Bad. I see it.
Yeah,
But
so
I've not.
You've been to one closing and you had a commissionectomy on that one.
Yeah. And that was maybe 15 years ago. Technology has really helped those closings be a lot smoother.
Oh yeah, and you got sellers and buyers in all different
Different
countries
areas
and
and-
everything like that. Yeah, I don't even go to title companies to close. So
No.
it's all mobile notary. They come on over, handle it.
Yeah, their DocuSign's a great tool. So
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, switching gears real quick, what is happening right now with buyers entering the market, effects of COVID, things like that?
It's I think a little bit. COVID it's here. It's been here a while. early on, we were very concerned about how are we going to do tours? How are we going to show the property to investors? I think everybody has now gotten pretty calm about it, so we're doing tours consistently, obviously wearing masks, hand sanitizing the hands, and just going into vacant units. When people are having to walk their units, usually they maybe walk in right literally to the open door, the threshold of the unit, look in, okay, I get it, and they leave. So everybody's trying to be respectful and understand the COVID situation. I think everybody's it's gotten normal now, but I think in regards to here in Dallas-Fort Worth, we're a little bit at the precipice of where multifamily money is being invested in the nation. Is Dallas-Fort Worth is in the top 3 list of any list that I always see about where to invest. COVID, I think, has really done a pivotal shift on, it used to be the coasts where a lot of the big groups would invest, Seattle and New York, Los Angeles, that kind of stuff. Well, that's shifted because of density and everything else and government policies to where, they used to call it the flyover states. Those are getting really seriously revisited a lot. Knoxville, Nashville, Raleigh, Charlotte, Dallas, Oklahoma City, Austin. Those are cities that are on the top 10 lists of a lot of lists, good lists, of our employment rate is lower than other parts of the country, even during COVID. And the cost of living, businesses are moving here. Fortune 500 businesses are moving here. Elon Musk, is kind of the high-profile guys moving to Austin. So you're getting a lot of attention to Texas, and then Dallas-Fort Worth is probably the number 1 marquee, metroplex. It's the 3rd or 4th largest MSA in the nation, but you can still purchase apartments, reasonably at a good cap rate and make money doing it.
Right, rather than a 3 cap in LA.
Right, exactly.
Where you're just holding on to it for appreciation.
Yes.
But what is that doing to other buyers that are trying to buy? People like me that are local, that are trying to buy. There's a lot of other money coming in now from other sources, and people reallocating, getting out of office and hospitality,
Right.
and things like that. So what's happening in the market too?
So we're seeing kind of an adjustment with COVID, that a lot of, at least on the high level, the Class A area, is that these funds have been established pre-COVID where they're going to invest in hospitality and retail and office. Well, they've now recalibrated those funds to get into multifamily. So you're now talking about a large fund becoming huge. And so they are pursuing assets in this space, and they're getting very good rates from the agencies, Fannie and Freddie. And so that's put a little bit of pressure on cap rates, the returns on investments, both A, B, and C product, on what everybody should be expecting to. So we're still underwriting, more of the workforce housing, the B and C assets, still what we would call the mid-teens IRR, your internal rate of return on a 7-year cash flow projection. Hey, what is going to be my average cash on cash every year for the next 7 years? So that's what that means. And people are when we talk to buyers, that's kind of where everybody's underwriting to would be, let's call it lower to middle teens.
On an overall IRR.
Yeah.
And because of that, there's more money pushing in here. Prices are going up. Prices are going up faster than rents are, and that's because of cap rate compression.
Yeah.
Are we going to turn into LA or New York where the yields that we get are much lower? Is that going to happen?
I don't think so. I think because Dallas, as just the fundamentals, we have extremely strong positive population growth here, and we're not overbuilding. Yes, we have anywhere from 27 to 29,000 apartment units coming online or in the pipeline, but that's really just satisfying the new growth, the new population growth.
Right.
Our ability to build new product. We don't have any oceans or mountains. We're not restricted that way, as well as Texas as a whole is very pro-business. So if anything, we are going to recruit more Fortune 500 or even Fortune 1000 companies here, because the population growth is probably paramount and the basis for for not having the issues that, let's call it, the East and West Coasts have.
So what's that going to do to prices, cap rates, and rents?
Good question.
You have your crystal ball.
Yeah, I was going
right?
to say it cracked a couple months ago. It's broken, but
Okay.
I would say rents are going to continue to go up. That organic rent growth. I don't want to put a number to it, but it would be an upward trend. I think pricing is with an organic, kind of ongoing rent growth. You are going to see prices go up for purchasing.
Are cap rates going to be pushed down?
I think cap rates are going to stay steady on where they are right now, in my
And
opinion.
on a Class B property, what kind of cap rate are you looking at? Tax adjusted cap rate?
Tax adjusted using the T90 on income, that kind of stuff for let's call it a B asset, 80s vintage, nice 80s vintage in the suburbs, that kind of stuff. You might be looking at a mid to low 4 cap.
Really?
Yes. And with the interest rates being just above 3, that gives somebody that year one 6-7% cash on cash kind of range story going in. The big selling point, I think, on almost any deal is what's the story. The story is almost more important than you're going in cap. We have properties have sold, they are distressed, they're banged up, they're 30% vacant and 30% occupied, and they're buying it on a 0 cap, a 1 cap or something. But hey, in year 3, I'm going to kill it. Deals in East Dallas. So it's really that story is almost more important than anything else.
That is interesting. That is very interesting. Is there anything that scares you coming up, or any concerns that investors should be looking out for?
I mean, it's the good thing is the Dallas Morning News, Steve Brown has been writing for real estate since 1982, and he is over and over always said, it seems like Dallas-Fort Worth, even during COVID, is working on all cylinders.
Yeah.
We're not overbuilt. We're not. Our infrastructure is sound. The cost of single-family homes, yes, has gone up, but that is also keeping kind of a restrictive cap on, renters jumping to buying their first single-family home. So they're staying in apartments. So there's just a lot of those fundamentals that are helping Dallas-Fort Worth, in my opinion, to continue a nice, steady upward trend on apartments and apartment values.
Perfect. Was there anything you want to close with? Is there any final words of wisdom to anybody that might listen?
Yeah, really. I would just say I've been doing this 22 years in multifamily. The old saying is, if you want to get into real estate, multifamily and grocery anchored retail is probably the 2 places to invest, because you've got to sleep and you've got to eat. Mm-hmm. And so I would say multifamily in Dallas-Fort Worth is really the place to invest in.
Oh, I agree wholeheartedly. So thank you so much for coming on out.
Thank you.
Hopefully that was very educational for everybody.
Yeah.
And
thanks for having me.
I appreciate it. And let's get Villa Creek sold there. So
totally agree.
Got that coming up. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Thank you everybody for joining us. And that was Chris Dueillet with CBRE. And your email address is
Chris. It's my name, Chris.Dueillet. That's spelled, last name spelled DEUILLET @cbre.com.
Yeah, Chris Dueillet. And if you call up there and you mispronounce his name, they're going to know that you don't know him.
Yes.
So that's Dueillet.
Dueillet, yes.
Chris
but
Dueillet.
They will know me, so.
Yeah, as much as you butcher,
Not
you
a lot
get
of
the name
Dueillets,
butchered.
yes.
What, not a lot of Dueillets, but how many Dueillets are in real estate?
That's right. Well, my dad retired.
I'm sorry, one more thing.
Yeah, my dad retired, and then I have my brother. He's the president of Structure Commercial. I'll give a little plug. Structure Commercial here locally. They do a lot of retail and office leasing. I think they lease over 140 retail strip centers. He's been doing it longer than I have, and then I have a brother down in Austin that sells multifamily down there also.
So the Dueillet, and who's he with?
He's with Berkadia.
Berkadia. So
Berkadia,
so
yes.
why spread out to all the different companies?
It's my Eric, my brother's always said, how come we just can't get together and stuff? So, but I think we all have different reasons.
Different niches,
yeah.
different.
And it's always hard to, be in business with a close friend or a relative, in my opinion. But,
yeah, that's true. But the Dueillet family has been in real estate, like I said, like we started off with my dad, and his dad actually did deals back in the late 80s,
Yeah.
early 90s.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's a lot of fun having that.
It's a good market, good industry.
Exactly, exactly. So thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate you listening. Hopefully you learned something. And if you need any other information, reach out to Chris or our company, and we'd love to help you out. Thank you so much. Bye.